My golden child brother stole my car and crashed it, and my parents expected me to forgive him. I've always known my parents favored my younger brother Ethan, but I never thought it would come to this. Growing up, Ethan was the golden child, charming, athletic, and the one my parents doted on. Meanwhile, I, the responsible and studious older sibling, was expected to be self-sufficient and let Ethan shine. This favoritism carried over into adulthood. When I graduated college, I got a decent job and saved up to buy my first car, a modest but reliable Toyota. It wasn't flashy, but I worked hard for it, and it was mine. Ethan, on the other hand, barely held a job, spent most of his time partying, and relied on our parents for everything. Despite our differences, I tried to keep the peace. But everything changed the night Ethan decided he was entitled to my car. It started when Ethan called me one Friday night, slurring his words and asking for a ride home from a party. He'd been drinking and couldn't drive his own beat-up car, which barely ran half the time. "Come on, bro," he said. "You're my big brother. Help me out." I was exhausted from a long work week, but I agreed. I drove across town to pick him up, and when I got there, he stumbled into the passenger seat, reeking of alcohol. On the way home, Ethan started rambling about how unfair it was that I had a nice car while he didn't. "You're doing fine," he slurred. "Why don't you help your little brother out? Let me borrow the car sometimes." I shut him down immediately. "Ethan, you're not borrowing my car. You can barely take care of your own." He pouted like a child and muttered something under his breath, but I ignored him and dropped him off at our parents' house. I thought that was the end of it. The next morning, I woke up to a frantic call from my mom. "Ethan's in the hospital," she cried. "There was an accident." My heart dropped. "What happened?" "He was driving your car," she said. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. "What do you mean, my car?" Apparently, after I dropped Ethan off, he had snuck into my apartment while I was asleep, taken my spare key, and stolen my car. He drove it to another party, got drunk again, and then decided to drive home. He lost control, swerved off the road, and crashed into a tree. My Toyota was totaled. At the hospital, Ethan was mostly fine, just some bruises and a broken wrist. My parents were relieved and doting on him like he was the victim. When I walked in, their concern turned into scolding. "How could you let this happen?" my mom demanded. "I let this happen," I snapped. "Ethan stole my car and crashed it." "He's your brother," my dad said, as if that excused everything. "He made a mistake. You need to be more understanding." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You're defending him? He could have killed himself, or someone else. Not to mention, my car is destroyed." Ethan, lying in the hospital bed, had the audacity to smirk. "Relax, man. It's just a car." I lost it. "That just a car is something I worked my ass off for. Do you have any idea how hard I've worked to save up for that?" My parents told me to calm down and that they'd help me deal with the situation. Their idea of helping? Offering to pay for Ethan's legal fees while expecting me to cover the cost of the car repairs or buy a new one entirely on my own. I refused. "Ethan can face the consequences of his own actions," I said. "I'm not paying for his mistakes." My parents were furious. They accused me of being selfish and unsupportive. "Family helps family," they said. But I was done being the responsible sibling who always had to clean up Ethan's messes. I filed a police report. If Ethan wanted to steal my car, he could deal with the legal repercussions. My parents begged me to drop it, claiming it would ruin his future. "Maybe it's time he takes responsibility for his actions," I replied. The fallout was intense. My parents stopped speaking to me for weeks, accusing me of abandoning Ethan in his time of need. Ethan tried to play the victim, complaining to our extended family that I was being too harsh. But to my surprise, most of our relatives took my side. They'd seen how Ethan had been coddled his entire life and agreed that it was time for him to grow up. Meanwhile, I focused on rebuilding. I got a cheap rental car to get to work and started saving for a new vehicle. It wasn't easy, but it felt good knowing I wasn't enabling Ethan's behavior anymore. Months later, Ethan finally apologized, not because he truly felt remorseful, but because the legal trouble caught up with him. He was fined, lost his license, and had to take mandatory driving classes. My parents eventually softened, but our relationship hasn't been the same since. As for me, I've set firm boundaries. Ethan and I are cordial at best, but I'll never trust him again. And if my parents want to keep enabling him, that's their choice. But I'm done being part of the cycle. What do you think? Was I right to press charges against my brother, or should I have handled it differently? Let me know in the comments.